Hey guys, Dantix here, back with some more Assassin's Creed Valhalla information. Today, a ton was dropped in an interview between the official PlayStation magazine and Darby McDevitt, the narrative director of the title. Like always, I'll try not to waste your time with over-explanations, but there's a ton to get through, including dragons, magic, lore, sequel setups, the map, no fetch quests, main villains, romances, trading, combat, dismembering, gear, and more. So, buckle up. Quick reminder that you can still win a Switch by following the link below and entering. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and join my Discord if you want to chat to me directly. So, let's continue. McDevitt says, I want fans to be able to wander through the world and almost at every turn feel like they're discovering something that increases their knowledge of the whole. It really feels like there's not a wasted moment in this game where you really just feel like every discovery, every narrative discovery has a kind of grand purpose. Really, like it just tickles you if you're an Assassin's Creed fan. Hopefully there's quite a number of moments where your jaw drops because you feel like, oh, that's how it connects to that. Okay, that's cool. So McDevitt also describes that the game is a bridge between the Hidden Ones and the Order of the Ancients as set up in Origins and Odyssey, and the Templars and Assassins as we know them in later games. McDevitt goes on to say, it's also why we spent a lot of effort trying to fill out our world with lore that has really meaningful connections to a lot of these titles before and after. Some things that are happening are starting to set the stage for what comes in the games to follow. So fans rejoice as those worried about whether or not this iteration will stay true to the pre-existing lore established in the titles prior have been put to ease. It seems like the team has made it a priority to keep the story not only canon, but expand quite a bit on the universe. He uses words like tickles and draw drops when discussing the tidbits of lore that you'll discover, and that really bleeds confidence to me. Not only that, it seems like they have the following titles in mind. They've already set the stage for a sequel, and that means they're avoiding the classic trap of narrative directors writing themselves into a corner. So you'll be doing a ton of exploring. There won't be any pyramids or the Pantheon to clamber up in terms of climbing. However, one thing that England had back then but doesn't have now is tons of Roman ruins. McDevitt explains that over time they got decrepit without the knowledge or the care to maintain, and they faded away. During this time, the Saxons mixed their wattle and dab huts together with the old Roman ruins. The larger cities have some heady heights to scale, but McDevitt continues. We're putting a lot of effort into making sure that everything you find, every piece of the world that you find has a handcrafted feel, and you're never without some kind of feeling of wow. So Ashraf and McDevitt use the word handcrafted a lot. Before it was for the quests that they have a handcrafted feel and gear, but now it's used for the world. They're implying that the locations have purpose, that someone is deciding that the town goes there in this particular spot for a reason, and there's not really a lot of filler space. McDevitt mentions that reaching areas could be different from how you traveled in Origins and Odyssey, as there'll be less of grinding and gating of those games in favor of an emphasis on storytelling. He says, the game has a very unique structure. Having left Norway for England, you pick a spot to settle for a very specific narrative reason. From there, McDevitt explains that there are two approaches to exploration when you begin the game. You can either go raiding, or you can move afield to build alliances. Raiding obviously grants you resources for you to build up your settlement, adding a blacksmith, a stable, or even beginning to cultivate farmland. He says, so you can build new buildings and new people will show up. New characters show up to give you new services and things like that over time. It's fairly extensive. Another approach mentioned is building alliances, and it comes about from a sense of vulnerability in a foreign land. McDevitt says you need to make friends, you need to make alliances, you maybe need to subdue parts of the country, suggesting that there are more than just the Saxons and Vikings that you need to discover and fight. We know that there'll be bandits, but maybe there's something more. I expect having to clear hostiles out of areas, but clearly there'll be some narrative weight to it. In my last video, I mentioned that the mission structure in Valhalla will be different from Odyssey and Origins, in that you'll be setting out from a single hub instead of moving from area to area exhausting the quests there. In this hub, you'll also be building alliances with neighboring territories as well as taking on the mainline stories. McDevitt says, you're always coming back. We call it a flower petal structure, where you go out from your settlement, you spend a few hours out in the world doing lots of stuff, and then you'll come back and you do that many, many times. And so the end result, if you were to chart your footsteps, would look like a big flower. So this is to give you more of an investment with the characters you meet. Many of the quest givers will remain in the world and could even become residents of your settlement or drop in to shed light on how the world is changing. He explains how his pet hate with RPGs is the fetch quest, which asks you to gather items for a character and then vanishes. This won't feature in Valhalla. He says, "We wanted to make sure that the characters you meet in the game are more memorable than that. You are more likely to remember them for a long time." This is further expanding on his notion that the quests are all handcrafted and designed to make you more invested. It seems they have listened to the criticisms of Odyssey and are working towards making Valhalla something you can really invest yourself in. I personally feel like people don't hate fetch quests, but hate how they're told. One of the ways is by a mindless NPC who has no actual bearing on anything you're experiencing. McDevitt has clearly recognized that, and it's kind of refreshing. So the main villain will be Alfred of Wessex, but McDevitt explains that there are greater scales of grey who you'll be fighting against, as we'll see Alfred go on a very personal journey of his own. McDevitt says, "Villain is the wrong word, but antagonist certainly. He was historically what you'd call an antagonist to the Vikings, or the Vikings were an antagonist to him, because we're trying to put you in the shoes of a Norse settler, a Norse Viking. We then have to do everything we can to make you feel like what you're doing is a necessity for the survival of your crew, your people, your village, and your settlement. That means stepping into this place, into this England, and pushing back." Alfred is an antagonist to that effort, but he's a very complex guy, and he's one of my favorite characters in the game, and I think we did right by him. So it seems it's not as black and white as it is with the Templars and Assassins when it comes to the game's main antagonist. In fact, the whole story seems to be a moral and personal struggle for Eivor. McDevitt suggested Eivor could have greater enemies in the world. So why did they leave Norway? Did the Order of the Ancients have something to do with it? It is suggested. So moving on, McDevitt mentions that he took influence from a lot of the Icelandic sagas for the events in Valhalla, including stories featuring dragons and magic. Whether or not that means dragons will make an appearance in the game is yet to be seen, but like mentioned in one of my last videos, it's suggested that they may be, well, fighting gods in dreamlike sequences, so perhaps there's also fighting mythical beasts as well as using magic. I'm like 90% sure there'll be something fantastical like this within the game. Also mentioned in my last video was the fact that Eivor has a coherent personality and isn't a blank slate. So when dealing with, say, lying characters, you can string them along and watch their tall tales unravel, or punch them. Both are within Eivor's personality, but it will change how the character feels towards Eivor. And since building alliances is the focus, this could be very important. Which leads into romances. They are back and they will, I quote, have a little more depth, and will be possibly used to foster alliances between clans and kingdoms, though McDevitt wouldn't confirm this. Based on how they readily talk about the importance of alliances, I wouldn't really put it out of the realm of possibility. Considering how bad romances were in Odyssey, how they didn't really want to commit. We all know the reason why, but can't say anything out of fear of shaking the hornet's nest, so there's only really up to go from here. Moving along, McDevitt explains why the hidden blade is not so hidden and worn on the top of the wrist. He says, "I call it the conspicuous blade. It was very important in Norse culture that when you got into battle and you killed somebody, that you'd be very upfront about it. So we decided that symbolically, if we put the hidden blade on the top, he would feel like he wasn't being clandestine or shady." So Ashraf mentioned a while back that Eivor's an assassin in training, but it seems he differs from them philosophically as well. So we'll have to see how it all plays out morally for him. We know a bit about the longboat already, but now we also know the team considers this your settlement on water. You can use its map to scan for places to raid or trade, and yeah, you can trade. So your crew members all have names and personalities. McDevitt says, over time you get unique raiders to join your crew and they'll hang out with you on your boat. They'll have personalities that persist even after you put them on your ship, so you hear about them a lot more than in Odyssey. Many a time in Odyssey, I would have a particularly hard fight with a merc, recruit them, and never really experience their personality again. It's good to see the dev team recognizing this flaw and expanding upon the system. In terms of combat, they've mentioned it before, but sword and axe strikers all have the wince-worthy crunch that you'd expect in the hands of a Viking warrior. McDevitt ensures that there's a real sense of weight to your attacks, and you can dismember and behead your enemies. This feature is welcome in this kind of game because without it, your attacks don't feel like they carry the force of a badass. And we know that feeling like a badass pushes you forward in games like this. So moving on, the loot box system from Odyssey and Origins are seemingly gone as well. Instead, your weapons and gear are earned and valued, being mostly able to be used throughout the entire game. McDevitt says, every piece of gear is unique in the game and can be upgraded extensively so that when you find a piece of gear, you're excited and you celebrate it. And it can stay with you for quite a long time. And it can be viable for quite a long time, so it's quite a different approach than the previous games took. So random drops will be no more. You won't find weapons or different rarity drops with random stats and abilities. Instead, you'll find unique weapons and gear, and these are to be cherished and upgraded throughout the entire game. I personally think there are pros and cons to both methods. I enjoy having the random factor in getting gear and items, as finding a truly exceptional one feels great, but I'm happy with the direction the team wants to go, as the theme seems to be, well, handcrafted. So that's all I have for you today. Well, what did you think? What do you think about all this information? Are you more excited for Valhalla or less excited? Let me know below, and be sure to do the standard YouTube stuff. For more Valhalla and everything RPG, keep it right here. I'll be back very soon with more. Bye, friends.